There are phrases that may seem innocent or even sweet at first glance, but behind these words can lie manipulative intentions, a lack of emotional responsibility, and a dangerous resistance to personal growth. If a woman ignores these signs, she risks entering a relationship that will drain her energy, cloud her judgment, and strip her of her inner strength. Carl Jung, the renowned Swiss psychologist, spoke of the shadow unconscious, the deep part of the psyche where we hide traits we deny in ourselves, and often projection onto others. It is usually in relationships that toxic behavioral patterns take root. That's why it's so important to recognize the words that signal such behavior early on to prevent long-term harm. In this video, I'll show you 5 phrases that, if you hear them from a man, should raise a red flag. It's not just about avoiding conflict, that would be too superficial. It's about understanding that sometimes, behind what seems like an ordinary conversation, there's a psychological game being played, one that could cost you your emotional peace and self-awareness. Seneca once said, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it." And all too often, we waste it on people who don't deserve it. So be mindful, because behind each of these phrases lies a deeper and more dangerous path. If you ignore them, they can lead you into exhausting relationships where you lose your focus, your self-respect, and most importantly, your connection to yourself. And believe me, no self-respecting woman who has worked hard for her peace and discipline should ever tolerate such a dynamic. Stay with me until the end. In the end, I won't just help you recognize these phrases, I'll also show you how to respond to them from a place of strength, emotional intelligence, and calm self-possession. Let's begin. You have to accept me the way I am. At first, this might sound like honesty, even vulnerability. But be careful. When a man uses this phrase to justify destructive behavior, it becomes one of the most common and dangerous red flags. Carl Jung taught us that self-awareness is the beginning of all wisdom. But he also made it clear that true growth begins when we stop making excuses and start taking ownership of your flaws. When someone hides behind the phrase, "This is just who I am," to avoid change, you're not dealing with a genuine person, you're dealing with someone who refuses to grow. This phrase usually shows up when you've already started noticing troubling behavior, emotional manipulation, avoidance of responsibility, or even passive-aggressive actions. And the worst part, when you try to address it, he plays the victim or accuses you of trying to change him. But here's the truth, accepting someone doesn't mean tolerance for the unacceptable. True authenticity isn't about staying the same, it's about having the courage to grow. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, the perfection of character is this, to live each day as if it were your last, without laziness, without pretense. A conscious woman who is committed to her own growth should not carry the burden of a man who refuses to grow. Being in such a relationship is like rowing a boat alone while he doesn't even pick up an oar. Accepting this phrase without question condemns you to a future filled with repeated excuses, broken promises, and a dynamic where you're the one doing all the emotional labor. Remember, the Stoics also believed that our environment shapes our growth. And if the person you're sharing your life with isn't helping you grow, he's holding you back. So the next time you hear this phrase, don't be fooled by how deep it sounds. Ask yourself, is he truly willing to look within, or is this just a clever way to avoid change? Because behind his words lies a constant resistance to growth, a denial of responsibility, and a defensive attitude towards self-improvement is a behavioral pattern that only gets worse over time. And this is where things get serious. Accepting that phrase is just the beginning. What follows are other subtle but destructive patterns. You'll slowly find yourself trapped in a dynamic where you're the one adapting, sacrificing, and making space, while he stays exactly the same. Protecting your peace is not selfish, it's self-care. You are not here to save anyone. You are here to share your life with someone who also wants to grow. Acknowledges his flaws and finds the courage to work on them, just like you do every day. Someone who refuses to change not only blocks his own growth, but holds yours back as well. Stay true to your values and act with integrity, even when your emotions are begging you to stay, because what comes next is even more delicate. All my exes were insanely toxic. When a man says this, it might sound like he's simply venting about his past relationships. But don't be fooled. Behind these words lies a much darker pattern, a clear sign of an emotional victim mindset, immaturity and projection. According to Stoic philosophy, true personal growth begins with honest self-reflection. Epictetus made it clear that it's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them. So if a man always blames his exes for everything that went wrong and never considers his own role in the conflict, chances are he's avoiding the truth. This is where depth psychology comes into play. Carl Jung taught that what we fail to make conscious will eventually control us from the shadows. And often the men who say, those who speak badly about all their exes are often projecting their own unresolved issues. This phrase reveals a dangerous chronic victim mindset. People who keep repeating this narrative rarely take responsibility for their actions. Instead, they shift the blame, dramatize the past, and unconsciously expect you to be the one person who won't let them down. But be careful, no one will ever free themselves from their shadow unless they're willing to face it directly. The real question is, were all of his exes truly toxic, or does he have a recurring pattern of behavior? A man who refuses to recognize a conscious woman, one who knows her worth and has learned not to betray herself, should take a serious look at himself. Jung said, "What we deny controls us." Being with someone who doesn't take emotional responsibility is like building a house on sand. No matter how hard you try to create a healthy relationship, he will keep operating from the same unconscious script. And the most painful part, sooner or later, the story he tells about his exes will be the story he tells about you. Because someone who needs to play the victim will always find a new person to blame. Being in a relationship like that is like rowing a boat with a hole in it. No matter how much love you pour in, it will still sink. That's why emotional discipline is so important. Don't just listen to words, ask yourself, has he ever talked about what he did wrong in past relationships, or is his story always about what was done to him? If he's never taken responsibility before, what makes you think he'll start now? Your role is not to be someone's therapist. You are not here to fix broken men who don't want to heal. You are here to share your path with someone who walks beside you, not with someone who drags you behind them. And when it comes to emotional manipulation, there's one phrase you need to recognize from the very beginning. It may sound like a declaration of love, but in reality, it's a dangerous emotional trap. If you really loved me, you'd do what I'm asking. This is one of the most subtle and destructive forms of emotional blackmail. At first, it might seem like a sincere request, a way of expressing needs. But if you look closer, in reality, what lies beneath is manipulative pressure, using your sense of love as a tool for control. The Stoics believed that true love cannot be forced. It must be chosen. It should be built on freedom, mutual admiration and respect, not guilt or coercion. As Epictetus said, no one can enslave you emotionally unless you allow it. And this phrase is designed to turn attachment into a tool of control. Carl Jung also spoke about this dynamic in terms of power. In his studies on the shadow, he noted that imbalanced relationships often begin when one person projects their insecurity and need for control under the mask of love. And phrases like this are a clear example. When a man says this to you, he draws an invisible line that defines your worthiness of his affection. In essence, he's saying, "You're only worthy of my love if you do what I want." And this phrase is designed to turn attachment into a tool of control. Carl Jung also spoke about this dynamic in terms of power. In his studies on the shadow, he noted that imbalanced relationships often begin when one person projects their insecurity and need for control under the mask of love. And phrases like this are a clear example. When a man says this to you, he draws an invisible line that defines your worthiness of his affection. In essence, he's saying, "You're only worthy of my love if you do what I want." This is not love. It's emotional manipulation in disguise. An emotionally mature woman must be able to distinguish a healthy request from a veiled demand. Because in the moment, giving in might feel like an act of love, but over time, you begin to lose parts of yourself, your authenticity, your boundaries, your personal power. And the most dangerous part is this. The more you give in, the more the demands grow. What starts as a simple test of love eventually becomes a routine of emotional submission, and ultimately, you're no longer sure whether you're acting out of love or out of fear of losing him. Phrases like this don't build a relationship, they slowly destroy it. So if you ever find yourself in a situation where someone makes you feel guilty for setting boundaries, protecting your time, your voice, or your way of thinking, pause. You're dealing with someone who confuses love with possession. You are not here to please someone at the expense of yourself. You are here to build a relationship where you can grow, express yourself, and be fully, unapologetically you. Without conditions. When a man says, "If you really loved me, you'd do what I'm asking," he's not just questioning your feelings, he's attacking your character. This phrase isn't meant to understand or connect. It's meant to control. It's a veiled attempt to suppress your will through guilt, to blur your boundaries so his can dominate. Carl Jung said that true love is neither possessive nor manipulative. It is a conscious act of shared freedom. And Stoic philosophy echoes this, teaching us that healthy love is not about. Love is not built on submission, but on mutual respect. If love becomes a tool for manipulation, then it's no longer love, it's power disguised as tenderness. When you give in to this kind of emotional blackmail, you not only lose your self-discipline, but you also inflict a deep wound on your self-worth. A woman who has done the inner work, who knows her value and honors her inner truth, should never betray what she believes is right just to avoid conflict. Because every time you give in against your will, you drift further away from who you truly are. And that is the most dangerous thing of all. The problem is, once you allow this to happen even once, the tactic tends to repeat itself. At first, it's a small request. Then, a more serious demand. And one day, without even realizing it, you begin living according to someone else's wishes, instead of being the main character in your own life. As any Stoic or follower of Jung's teachings would say, the answer is simple, but powerful. Stay calm. Act according to your principles, not the fleeting desires of someone who doesn't respect your boundaries. Because someone who truly loves you has no need to manipulate or blackmail you. They listen to you, understand you, and respect you, even in disagreement. It's far better to face an uncomfortable but honest conversation than to live each day with the quiet feeling that you've lost your emotional freedom. You don't need to constantly explain or justify your choices in the face of guilt disguised as love. Because a wise woman knows, not every battle is worth fighting, and those aimed at breaking your will aren't worth starting at all. And since we're speaking about emotional manipulation, there's a phrase even more insidious, subtle but cruel. You're not enough for me. Hearing these words from someone who claims to love you can be devastating. This phrase doesn't just hurt, it's designed to undermine your self-worth at its core. It's not mere criticism, it's a direct attack on your identity, your value, your essence. Carl Jung explained that many people project their inner dissatisfaction onto others. And this phrase is pure projection. When a man tells you that you're not enough, he's not actually talking about you, he's speaking about his own emptiness, distorted expectations, and constant need for control. He's trying to make you feel small so that you become dependent on his approval. Stoic philosophy reminds us that our true worth doesn't come from the opinions of others, but from our virtue, our actions, and our inner integrity. Marcus Aurelius put it plainly. Do not let another man's soul rule your own. And that's exactly what this phrase tries to do, control you through insecurity. Anyone who compares, belittles, or implies that you are not enough is really just a way to make you work harder, not out of love, but to earn their approval. And in this game, you will always lose, because the standard keeps changing. Today you're not enough for one reason, tomorrow for another. And eventually you're left drained, doubting what you once knew with certainty. A conscious woman doesn't beg for love or feel the need to prove her worth. You are not here to meet someone's constantly shifting expectations. You are here to share your life with someone who values you exactly as you are. It should inspire you to grow, not to doubt yourself. So if you ever hear that phrase, pause, take a breath, and remember who you are. Don't fall into the trap of thinking you need to become someone else for a person who fails to see all that you already are. That insecurity isn't yours, it's his. As Jung once said, you cannot make someone see your light if all they seek is their own shadow. And as any Stoic would remind you, your peace is worth more than any attempt to fit into someone else's mold. External validation is fleeting, unstable, and often self-serving. True confidence is born when a woman learns to accept herself, trust her intuition, and live according to her own values. There is no greater mistake than allowing someone, especially a man who uses your insecurities against you, to define your worth. When a man says you're not good enough for him, he's not being honest with you. He's projecting his own emptiness, inflated ego, and need for control. This phrase isn't searching for truth. It's trying to subject your mind and self-worth to constant judgment. Spoiler, judgment will always be unfair. Carl Jung explained that what we do not make conscious becomes our fate. And if you don't recognize comments like this in time, you may find yourself trapped in a relationship where you're constantly trying to prove your worth. In that struggle, you forget who you are. The Stoics also taught that no external opinion has power over you unless you give it that power. Marcus Aurelius said it best. Do not let another person's soul rule your own. If a man insists on making you feel incomplete, the wisest choice is not to stay and try to prove him wrong. It's to walk away with dignity and without hesitation, not out of pride, but out of self-respect. Emotional discipline means you don't allow empty words to destroy what you've worked so hard to build. Your confidence, your clarity, your freedom. As Seneca said, the greatest power is self-mastery. And that self-mastery begins the moment you choose not to absorb emotional attacks disguised as constructive feedback. So if you hear this phrase, take a deep breath, square your shoulders, and remember, the real problem isn't you. It's his need to feel superior at the expense of your self-worth. Walk away knowing that your value is not measured by someone else's standards, especially not by the standards of a man who cannot see your greatness. And now we come to the final phrase, perhaps the most dangerous of them all. Do whatever you want. A phrase said in a passive-aggressive tone. If a man says this with sarcasm, coldness, or resentment, he's not actually giving you freedom. He's setting an emotional trap designed to make you feel guilty. He's making the decision for you. He's not giving up control. He's disguising manipulation as permission. Carl Jung spoke about the hidden ways people manipulate from the shadows. And this phrase is a perfect example. He doesn't say what he truly feels. He doesn't express what he really thinks, but expects you to guess. And if you don't, then come the guilt, the drama, or the blame. Stoic philosophy teaches that healthy relationships are built on clear and direct communication. Seneca put it perfectly. Speak in such a way that your words shouldn't require interpretation. When someone speaks to you in riddles or double meanings, they're not communicating, they're manipulating your emotions. Phrases like these keep you in a constant state of tension. You're trying to decode them, trying to please the other person and avoid a negative reaction, until you realize you're living according to their emotions, not your own. Gradually, your inner peace begins to crumble. A woman with emotional intelligence should never play this game. The best response to a phrase like, do what you want, is literal action. So do it, without fear, without over-explaining, without getting caught in their emotional web. That one act will break the vicious cycle of manipulation, and force the other person to either grow up and be direct, or sit alone in their passive-aggressive silence, because you are no longer playing their emotional games. Both Carl Jung and the Stoics agree. Living with clarity and authenticity is the path to true freedom. And that freedom begins the moment you stop reacting and start choosing. Choosing your words, your boundaries, and who truly deserves your energy. Responding clearly or walking away from a conversation filled with ambiguity is not rudeness. It's emotional intelligence. It's a way to break the manipulative cycle. and draw a firm boundary that says, you will not allow anyone to play with your emotions. The Stoic approach to such situations is simple and effective. Don't try to decode what someone doesn't have the courage to say outright. Ambiguity is a tool of control, and a conscious woman, just like a Stoic man, will always choose clarity, consistency, and inner freedom. Stay true to your decisions. Act with conviction. And never forget that a man who genuinely wants to be with you doesn't need to manipulate you, speak in riddles, or stir up emotional confusion. Healthy love doesn't hide behind games. It shows itself openly. Inner peace is achieved when your thoughts, words, and actions are in harmony. And as we've seen in this video, phrases that may seem harmless at first glance are often clear warning signs. Signs that, if not recognized in time, can lead you to relationships that drain your energy, rob you of focus, and disconnect you from your very essence. Stoic philosophy and the deep psychology of Carl Jung urge us to look beyond words, to see the essence, so we can protect our emotional stability through wisdom. Because it's not about judging others,